All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a very specific astrological forecast that's zeroing in on February 2026. It suggests a major turning point involving the US, Iran, and the broader Middle East. But here's the twist. The real story isn't about some destined war. It's about something much more subtle and, frankly, more dangerous. A single, preventable geopolitical miscalculation.
So, I know what you're probably thinking. Does this mean war is inevitable? Is it all just fated to happen? It's the first question anyone would ask, right? But the analysis we're breaking down points to a completely different kind of threat.
And this, right here, is the absolute key. The forecast isn't pointing to some long, drawn-out war. No, it's highlighting a moment of incredible pressure, a moment where leaders thinking they're making the smart move to stop a bigger problem could take one decisive action that just completely spirals out of control. The real risk is a single critical error in judgment.
So, what is it that creates this pressure cooker environment? Well, according to this astrological breakdown, the main trigger is a really powerful solar eclipse on February 17th, 2026. Now, in this kind of analysis, an eclipse isn't just a cool thing to see in the sky. It's viewed as a major geopolitical catalyst. Okay, so what does that even mean, an eclipse as a trigger? Astrologically, think of it as something that forces everyone's hand. It doesn't decide who wins or loses, but it creates these moments where decisions feel permanent, or bazgashna pazir, irreversible. It's when leaders feel like their options are dwindling, and that's exactly when critical mistakes can happen. It's the spark that starts the chain reaction, not the final explosion.
To really get why this moment is seen as so volatile, we have to decode the specific astrological alignment. It's the unique combination of planetary energies in play that, according to the forecast, really spells out the precise nature of the risk we're talking about.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The whole event takes place under the sign of Aquarius. And in astrology, Aquarius has nothing to do with old-school conflict, land grabs, invasions, territory. It's all about systems, technology, networks, and alliances. So right away, that tells us that any conflict here would likely be a shock to global systems. We're talking financial markets, oil supplies, cyber warfare, not a traditional ground war.
And this just paints the picture perfectly. You have two key energies colliding. First, you've got Saturn, which brings this immense, grinding structural pressure. It's that feeling of the clock ticking down, where patience is gone and leaders feel like they have to do something. Then you throw Mars into the mix. Mars is all about sudden, forceful, explosive action. So when you pull that Mars trigger under all that Saturn pressure, what do you get? A sudden, decisive move that's designed to solve a problem once and for all.
So this combination of pressure and action leads us right to the heart of the forecast, the anatomy of the miscalculation itself. How exactly could a crisis like this actually start? The analysis points to some very specific errors that the US and its allies might be vulnerable to in this kind of high-stakes environment.
The analysis is also super clear about what it means by miscalculation. This isn't some reckless, emotional decision. It's a move that, on paper, looks totally logical, totally rational. But it's a move that misses one hidden variable. And that one oversight is what kicks off an unstoppable chain reaction. So the forecast actually lays out three potential paths to this crisis. The most likely, sitting at 35%, is underestimating how Iran would react, basically assuming a limited strike will only get a limited response. The second most likely, at 30%, is the belief that any action taken can be neatly contained and controlled. And the third, at 20%, is completely misreading Iran's internal situation and thinking that a bit of outside pressure will make the whole thing collapse. And this just lays the core tension bare, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the logical assumption. A quick, forceful action will fix the problem and stop something worse from happening. But on the other hand, you have the astrological warning. In this kind of system-focused, Aquarian environment, nothing is contained. Any action like that would send uncontrollable shockwaves through the very global networks, oil, markets, alliances, that everything depends on. Okay, so with all this intense pressure building, what does that actually mean for Iran? Well, the forecast doesn't just give one single outcome. Instead, it sketches out three very different potential futures based on these astrological pressures. The analysis actually puts some hard numbers on these scenarios. The most likely outcome, with a 65% chance, is that Iran is pushed into a position of what's called relative weakness.
Then you have a much riskier but still significant 25% possibility of a game-changing strategic move. And finally, a 10% chance of just costly survival. So that big 65% slice, the most probable path, isn't an outright collapse. It's more like being backed into a corner. Iran would be on the defensive, just reacting to events, and dealing with massive pressure from both the outside and from within. In this scenario, its ability to act freely is seriously cut down, and just holding its ground becomes incredibly costly. But what about that 25% game-changer scenario? That's the wild card. We're not talking about a conventional military victory here. The forecast suggests it would be something asymmetric, something totally out of left field. Maybe a technological breakthrough that just rewrites the rules of deterrence, or a shocking new alliance that scrambles everyone's plans, or even an internal power shift that nobody on the outside sees coming. All right, let's pull the camera back out, because no matter which specific path Iran takes, the forecast's biggest, loudest warning is about the systemic impact. The real danger isn't about who wins or loses a direct fight. It's about the chaos that gets unleashed on the entire system. And this number is absolutely crucial. It's the combined probability of those top two miscalculation risks we talked about, underestimating Iran's reaction and thinking the situation can be controlled. So what that really means is this. The analysis is saying there's a greater than 60% chance that any limited action just spirals. It becomes a crisis that nobody can steer anymore. In that scenario, there are no winners. The whole thing just morphs from a contained attack and response situation into long-term systemic instability that just drags everyone down. And what does that systemic chaos actually look like? Well, we're talking about massive instability across the region as alliances start to crack and shift. We're talking about sudden, violent shocks to oil prices and global financial markets. And of course, the huge risk that this thing escalates unintentionally, pulling in proxies and allies. The entire game just changes. You know, there's a single line from the source material that just sums this all up perfectly. In the kind of high-pressure, interconnected world of February 2026, the biggest mistake any leader could possibly make is to think that they are still in complete control of the consequences. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. In a system where confidence can travel so much faster than clarity, where we feel sure of our actions before we truly understand the situation, is the belief that we're in control actually the most dangerous variable of all? Thanks for watching.